Hi, everybody, and welcome to UCTV Alive for Kids during Science Week. I don't know what you're doing this week at school, but here in Tasmania in Hobart, which is the gateway to Antarctica, there's a lot happening to do with Antarctica. Um, that's why today on UCTV Alive for Kids, we've got Dr. Paige Kelly coming on to talk about the different things that live in the ocean in Antarctica and how they might be affected by rising heating waters and changing climate. But before I introduce Paige onto the screen, just going to do some housekeeping quickly. This show is brought to you by the Peter Underwood Centre at the University of Tasmania. I work there. My name's Tess. We are recording today's episode so that we can put it on our website and other schools can watch. Your privacy is protected during that recording by making sure your microphone and camera stays off, and you can just communicate with us via the Q&A function, because we're going to do a 3-minute break screen a little bit later, which will give you the chance to send in heaps of questions. I'd also really love to acknowledge country. Since we're all dialing in from different areas, there's vastly different groups that are represented, and we're all dialing in from different countries and places. And Science Week is a good reminder that Aboriginal people were the first scientists in Australia. And here in Tasmania, Tasmanian Aboriginal people have had like a long connection to the land, and I pay my respect to elders past and present, and to those people that didn't make elder status. But now I would love to welcome to the screen Dr. Paige Kelly.
Hi everyone, thanks for tuning in to listen to a bit about my research today. So I'm Paige, I love science and I work for the University of Tasmania, and today I'm going to be talking to you a bit about some of the changes that are happening in Antarctica around temperature and what that means for two really important species. So one being Antarctic krill, who like it really cold, and the other species being Antarctic salps, who like it a bit warmer, and talking about that really interesting relationship.
It sounds really cool, Paige. I'm going to let you jump straight into it and give you the floor to do your presentation for the next 7 minutes or so. I'm going to turn off my camera now, but enjoy, everybody. I'm really looking forward to hearing what you have to say, Paige.
Awesome, thank you. So I've got a PowerPoint to share with you guys. Try to make it really colourful. And I've done some drawings because I think that science should always be colourful and interesting, but it's just going to take a moment to load and have a think about it. There we go. So as Tess said, I'm going to be talking about a species that likes it hot. And that species is Antarctic salps. And that's what we've got there on the Antarctic iceberg, enjoying the warmer weather in their speedos. So Antarctic salps, as I said, have a really interesting relationship with Antarctic krill and temperature. And that's what we're going to dive into. So to start off with, what are some of the changes that are happening in Antarctica? So here we've got a bit of a travel pamphlet, and it says, "Come visit Antarctica. The water is warmer than ever." And the ocean surrounding Antarctica, which we call the Southern Ocean, is in fact getting warmer. And in some spots, it's warming 3 times more quickly than any other ocean in the world. So sometimes you might hear the Southern Ocean be called a hotspot for ocean warming. And lots of species that live in Antarctica are really picky about their surroundings. They live in Antarctica because they like it being really cold. So even a small change in temperature can then change where we find these species and how they behave. And if it's getting a little bit warmer, we also might see some species that we usually find further north come down to enjoy the hotter environment. And so the changes that we're seeing in Antarctica, they're not all that different from what we can see on land. So during spring, when we've got a little bit of sun, but it's not too hot, and let's say we've had lots of nice rain during winter, you might notice that gardens are really productive. So we get lots of green grass, lots of different species of flowers will grow, and we get birds and bees, and we have what we call a really productive ecosystem. But then once it gets really hot, you notice that things start to die off. So the flowers can't survive, the grass starts to go brown, and you might see just one species like capeweed go nuts and overrun everything. And that's a bit like what we can see happen between krill and salp. So I mentioned that in cooler temperatures, we might have a really nice productive garden. When the oceans are nice and cold, we'll get lots of Antarctic krill. So they're like a little prawn that's about the size of your pinky. So we can definitely see them with our eyes. And they like really cold water. That's between 0.5 and 1 degrees Celsius. So definitely not water that we'd want to swim in. And whales, penguins, and seals all love eating krill. So krill is a really important food source for the mammals in the Southern Ocean. And then on the right, we've got Antarctic salps, and Antarctic salps are a bit like the capeweed that you might see in gardens. So they do really well in warmer environments, and they can survive in waters up to 8 degrees. So they've got this really big temperature range that they can do well in. And they're a bit of a freaky species because they can actually clone themselves. So they don't always have to go out and find a mate. So that's a really, what we say, advantageous life strategy that's going to give them the edge over other species. But unlike krill, salps are rubbery. They're a gelatinous organism. So they're not nice and meaty. So they might not be a good substitute for whales, penguins, and seals if they were to come across a whole heap of salps rather than krill. So we really want to keep track of that relationship between krill and salps and temperature and see what's going on. We've got lots of questions to answer. And I was lucky enough to go down to Antarctica, and I went on a boat that was called the Aurora Australis, and it was a big orange boat. So you might remember seeing photos of that, or if you're in Tasmania, you might have seen it down at the wharf. And just like how space missions have their own special names, we also name our marine voyages. And I went on what was called the K-Axis voyage. And we left from Tasmania and we went all the way over to the Southern Ocean, right near Antarctica, where this red circle is. And we did lots of sampling. So at lots of different locations, we threw a net over the boat and brought it back up to see what we could find. So what did we find? Well, a third of the time when we threw over the net, we found krill and salps mixed together in a bit of a party mix. So they were living together. So what does this mean? Well, first off, it means that salps are coming down and they're kind of invading what we would call krill territory. So it's like they're coming into their homes, and now krill's got to share this ocean space with salps that they probably don't want to have to share. So we call that overlap in habitat. And we also found that krill and salps were eating some of the same foods. So krill love eating diatoms, which are microscopic plankton. And diatoms get caught up in the sea ice when it freezes. And then when it starts to melt in spring, a whole heap will be released into the water and krill can have a feast. And diatoms are one of their favourite foods, and they really don't want to share them, but they're going to have to if they keep on having to share their space with salps. And in case you haven't seen what a diatom looks like, this is what they look like under the microscope. So really tiny, but really, really beautiful. And they look like they belong in a jewelry box or something like that. So I said that krill and salps, they have to share their space, and they also have to share food. So we call that competition for resources, resource competition. So we've got a bit of a salp versus krill story going on. And this is something that we really want to keep track of in the future to see if that competition really starts to ramp up, if it intensifies, and to see who might come out on top. So who's going to win? Are we going to see more salps, or are we going to see more krill? And then what about the whales, seals, and penguins that love eating krill? What's going to happen to them if they start to come across more salps than krill? So we know that krill are really nutritious and really good for these mammals. And we want to see how salps stack up as an alternative food source. So what we did to compare the two is we blew up krill and salps. So we literally made them explode. And then we measured the heat that came off them. And this told us what their energy content was. So all food has energy, and you'll eat food like Wheat Bix and Nutrigrain that, you know, puts itself out there as really high energy. So that's like what krill are. They're high energy food. But we found that salps have only a really tiny fraction of the energy that krill do. So predators of krill, if they were to eat salps instead, they'd have to eat thousands and thousands more if they wanted to have enough energy to swim and to mate and to keep warm and to just go about their day-to-day life. So salps really are like a diet food for our mammals in the Southern Ocean, and we don't want them to have to eat all salps instead of krill in the future. So those are some of the things that I've found out through my research. But in science, we're always looking at the next question and what can we answer next. And something that researchers are looking at is whether salps and krill can separate out in the ocean in kind of these separate layers, like they've got their own apartment levels so that they don't have to overlap as much, and maybe they can coexist a bit better. And I think this is really cool because this is how humans share space as well. We have, different levels in apartment buildings so that we can get on and share space. And we're always looking at the big picture as well. So in my research, I really focused on salps and krill and that, nice relationship or not so nice relationship that they've got going on. But we also have researchers that are doing what we call whole ecosystem studies that are looking at everything from the tiny little diatoms to krill and salps to the mammals that eat them. And they're looking at everything as one and trying to piece it all together because we always want to keep sight of the big picture. So that's what I've got to share with you guys. And I know that there's a question time. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to answering your questions about Antarctica and about the research that I do. So I'll hand back to Tess.
That's awesome, Paige. Thank you so much for your presentation. I love the illustrations that you made. They're so good. Are you a secret cartoonist?
I do love drawing, yeah. So science and art don't have to be totally separate. You can definitely combine the two, and that's something that I always, really enjoy doing.
That's amazing. Look, we've got a good 15 minutes left of the webinar, and I want to save as much room as possible for questions. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put on a 3-minute break screen, everyone. So people from Tassie are very familiar what happens here, but you can use this chance to let your teacher or parent, if you're at home, or carer, type in a question for us to answer after the break, for Paige to answer. If you'd like a shout out, just let us know your school name and the first name of the student. And in the same way, it was really interesting at the start to learn where everyone's coming from. Let us know what state you're dialing in from, because looking at the registrations, we had people from not just Tassie, but Victoria, New South Wales, the Northern Territory, Queensland, and South Australia. And in fact, I think there was a South Australian homeschool from Middleton that said hello as well in the Q&A just before your presentation, Paige. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put on that screen, and I will see you guys soon. Hi everyone, we're back. I've been loving reading all the questions during that break. I think Paige has probably had a little look as well. Yeah, awesome. Should we jump straight in, Paige?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, great. So the first question is from Woodbridge School, which is in Tassie, and they've asked, how long have you been into science?
It's a really good question. So I think I really started to get into science when I was in high school, because that's when you can start picking subjects like environmental science and chemistry, and really start to find your own path. But in primary school, really loved having a go at experiments. I'm really lucky being in Tassie, being close to the beach and being close to nature. But marine science is definitely for everyone, no matter how far away from the ocean you are. If you love being outside like I did and you love being in nature, you'll just find that you love science pretty automatically. So I think that love's always been there. And I think school really lets you embrace it and really sink your teeth into it. So yeah, been really lucky.
Good answer. And then there's a couple of questions from Moona Primary. The first one is, with global warming, how long would it take all the ice to melt? And then there's another question from Caleb asking, are the krill and salps at risk of going extinct?
Oh, these are all such good questions. These are questions that researchers are trying to answer and having trouble answering with sea ice. What we can say is that by the year 2100, Antarctica could have lost a quarter of the sea ice that we have now. So that's one prediction, which is pretty scary, which could change a lot of things. And when it comes to krill and salps, and in terms of going extinct, krill would definitely be what we call the most vulnerable in terms of going extinct, because their environment's starting to change in a way that they don't like. So it's starting to get a bit warmer. we're starting to lose sea ice that holds the food that they love, whereas salps are far more easygoing. They can eat lots of different food. They don't mind if it's a bit warmer. So they've really got the advantage. So it's krill that are at risk of becoming extinct in the future.
Yeah, so interesting. Paula, who's from Dubbo Public School. Hi, guys. It's amazing that we've got a school from regional New South Wales joining. They ask, how can salps clone themselves?
So salps have a really freaky way of reproducing, and they actually have two different forms that they come in, two different life stages. So one life stage, they can just bud off a whole chain of clones of themselves, which is really bizarre when you think about it. And then those chains that they've budded off, they then mate together and then form an individual that can then bud off another chain, and then they mate. And it's just part of their life strategy that they've developed to take advantage of their surroundings, so they can produce thousands of themselves at once.
Wow, that's amazing. Now, Mads, which is from a Cremorne homeschool, and I assume it's the Cremorne in Tassie. Hi, guys. Their homeschool asks, who breeds faster, the salps or the krill?
Salps definitely breed faster. So krill have got to lay eggs, and the eggs have got to sink to the bottom of the ocean and then come back up once they've hatched to feed. And they've got a bit of a wait to go through, but salps can just bloom. If the day's right and if there's lots of food, they can do that cloning of themselves and just produce a whole chain. So they can get onto it pretty quickly and outnumber other species.
Yeah, wow. And have they always been in Antarctica, just in smaller numbers?
Yeah, so some of the trends that we're finding is that we're potentially finding higher numbers further south. So they've always kind of been hanging around the Southern Ocean, but there's always been a pretty clear distinction of what's salp territory and what's krill territory, and that warmer and colder water divide. But that's starting to become a bit more blurry, and they're coming further south.
Yeah, wow. Now, St. Helens State School have asked a question, and I think that this is the one in Queensland that introduced themselves at the start, not the St. Helens in Tassie. So hi, guys. They've asked, how do the salps know that the water is warmer for them to migrate to?
That's a really good question as well. So in the Southern Ocean, we have lots of currents and lots of water systems that are changing and potentially getting closer to Antarctica as well. So Antarctica is like a circle, and it's got what we call belts around it. So different currents that go all the way around. And if they're starting to get a bit closer, then they're going to draw the warmer species in. So they really just go where these currents are taking them. And as those currents change course and go further south, they're going to go with those nice warm waters.
Wow. There's a question here from Hayley Berry Berwick, which I think is in Victoria. They've asked, how much energy does a krill have compared to a salp? And that question is from Lisa. Hi, Lisa.
Yeah, really good question. So what we found was that a salp had less than 1% of the energy of a krill. So when we were looking at penguin diets, to satisfy a penguin for a day, they might have to eat maybe just over 1,000 krill, but they'd have to eat over 100,000 salps. So if they wanted to be able to swim and to go and find a mate, so it's a really massive difference.
Yeah, and that's problematic for the animals eating them, because then they're getting tired quicker, or it's just more time intensive, or
yeah, so they wouldn't be getting much nutrition. I think we'd be worried that they might lose weight, that their offspring might not be as healthy. Can they it's really important that they can develop, a layer of fat and eat fatty foods. So those, we might see some negative changes in all of those qualities if they were to eat like a junk food, like salps.
sure, yeah, sure. So it's junk food essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the students at the Sydney Children's Hospital School has asked, how big are salps and what do they eat?
So salps are about the same size as krill. So they're about, the size of your pinky as well, but their chains can stretch for hundreds of kilometres. So they can take up a whole heap of space. and they're what we call filter feeders. So when they swim, they bring in lots of phytoplankton, tiny little particles in towards them, and they can eat a whole variety. So they'll eat the diatoms that krill also like to eat, but they can eat other ones called dinoflagellates. They're really not fussy, and that's a really big advantage for them, not being a fussy eater and not being too fussy where they live.
And is it a disadvantage for other species because they're eating the food that those other species normally eat?
Yeah, definitely. So krill are more picky. They love their diatoms. So even though diatoms are microscopic, they're one of the bigger plankton species, and they know what they like. And then they've got this other species coming in and taking some of it. But krill don't really have an alternative that they like to eat. So yeah, that's really problematic for them.
Yeah, right. We've got a lot of questions here from West Launceston Primary. Should we do like a real quick fire round?
Yeah.
Okay,
Go for it.
So Charlotte's asked, how long were you in Antarctica for?
So I was in Antarctica for about 2 months, and that might sound like a really long time, but it's actually quite a short time. So people can be down there for 1.5 years if they're living on station, but we were just down there doing lots of sampling, got to hang out on the ice for a bit, and then came back to Tassie.
Wow. Mackenzie has asked, how long do the salps take to clone themselves?
So they can reproduce within days. So their lifespan is only about 6 months, and they'll go through lots of breeding over those 6 months, whereas krill can live for around 6 or 7 years. So it's much more rapid with salps.
Wow. Mabel has asked, do salps sting humans like jellyfish?
No, they don't. And something that's really interesting is that even though salps look like jellyfish, they've actually got a backbone in them. So they're more closely related to humans than they are to jellyfish. And thankfully, they don't have a stinger attached to them.
Wow. Finn's asked a good question, but you've just answered it just before, which is how long do salps live for? Six months? Yeah.
About 6 months, yeah.
Yeah. This is a good question from Amy. Do salps have any benefits?
So one benefit might be that salps, so krill can swim, and they've got they've got more of a brain, and they know what they want to do and where they want to go. But salps are really just kind of blobs in the ocean. So even though they're not a very healthy food to eat, they're very easy to catch. So whales and seals wouldn't have to go and spend much energy to find salps. And because they can bloom, there can be a whole heap of them all in the one place at one time. So I think that would be the one advantage of them if you were going to eat them, is that you wouldn't have to go very far from your home.
Yeah, sure. That makes sense. And Lily has asked, are salps related to krill?
No, so they're quite different. So krill are what we call euphorbids, and salps are part of a big family called tunicates. So, and krill are really meaty, have quite different life cycles. Salps are, gelatinous kind of blobs, but they're both fascinating, but they just happen to overlap and be competing, even though they're very different.
Yeah, wow. There's still heaps of questions here. I'm going to try to get through some of the other schools that we haven't heard from yet. There's one here from the Friends School in Hobart. Their teacher has said, apparently a whale was seen in the Derwent River near Storm Bay last week. Are water temperatures around Tasmania changing?
That's a really good question. So we actually used to see far more whales around Tasmania, just say 200 years ago. They used to come up the Derwent River and keep people awake at night. Naturally, whales do migrate, so they will go further north to breed where it's warmer, and then they'll come back down to the Southern Ocean where there's lots of food for them. There is warming off the east coast of Tasmania. We do know that the waters are changing there, so it all might be interlinked. But we do see whales, come north because it's a bit warmer for them to breed.
Yeah, wow. Okay. And there's a couple of questions here from Eliza, which I didn't have time to note down from the spreadsheet what school or home group they're dialing in from. So feel free to just let us know now at the end. But there's a couple of questions from Eliza. So maybe I'll read out the top one, which is how fast do krill and salps move?
So they're not Olympic swimmers or anything like that. They're slow enough that mammals can catch them. So fish can also, swim and take, chunks out of krill and salp masses. So they're not swimming faster than, other animals, but they tend to clump together and form really big masses. So and that's how they hang out. So they're not all, swimming independently from each other.
Yeah. So that question from Eliza was from Timothy and Levi in Middleton in South Australia, which was the homeschool that said hello at the start. So thank you for reminding me of that. There's still lots of questions here. There's 20 questions that we still haven't got to, but it's the end of the episode, Paige. Did you want to have a quick look through the questions and answer one quickly? See if there's
definitely. I will answer. I really love the questions. Why are the animals running out of these resources? So, yeah, it's really tough on whales, seals, and penguins. With krill, they've got a couple of challenges. So their environment's not looking great as it's getting warmer, but they're also being harvested and fished for human consumption as well. So that's another hit that they're taking. So it's a combination of what's going on in the environment and what we're doing as humans as well. And, as you guys get older and you make choices about what you buy and what you eat, those are things that you can think of as well. Where's this fish coming from, or how's this impacting ecosystem? So that's a really great big picture question.
Yeah, great. And that one was from Woodbridge School in Tassie. Yeah, awesome. Well, I wish we had more time to go through all the remaining questions. We've loved having so many different schools on today from all around Australia. Thank you so much, Paige, for joining us.
You're welcome. I've had a great time. It's awesome to see so many people tune in as well from so many different states. It's great.
Definitely. We'll be back next month with UCTV for another Antarctica episode, actually. This time we'll have someone from the Mawson's Huts Foundation coming on to talk about their mobile classroom. Her name is Leah Conry. So that's on the 2nd of September. So we hope to see a few more people then. But in the meantime, enjoy the rest of Science Week, and feel free to get in touch with UCTV or the Peter Underwood Centre. But we've got a little comment from one of the schools saying, thank you, we really enjoyed the episode. And that was from St Helens State School in Queensland. So thank you so much, guys. That's so exciting to hear. We'll sign off now. See you later, everyone. Bye.